the Shire Law Group here in Lincolnshire, Illinois. We are so fortunate to have professionals like Karen and Alan who share their time and their expertise with the families of Lincolnshire to help us understand the legal aspect of being parents and that transition from when our children are our children to the time when they are legally adults. And I cannot tell you how I've heard this presentation more than once, and I have learned something from it every single time. So thank you so much, Alan and Karen, for helping and sharing your knowledge with our community. We are so fortunate. Families who are listening to this meeting is being recorded now and will be available with translated subtext on the SHS Family Engagement YouTube site. So without further ado, and if you have a question, please do us a favor. We all have our chat boxes up. Just write it in the chat. That is how we will take questions throughout the program. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Karen and Alan.
Thank you so much, everybody, for spending part of your evening with us. We are very excited to be here this evening to present what you must know when your child turns 18. As Mara introduced, I'm Karen Nadoff.
And I'm Alan Press, and thank you, Mara and Jen, for the kind introduction. We're very excited to do this presentation this evening. I think you'll get a lot of great information. And again, if you do have questions, please feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that periodically. If you have a very specific question, maybe one that may not be of interest to everybody in the group. Actually, everybody too, if you can mute yourself, that would be great. Mara, is there a way to mute everybody or? Okay, great, sorry about that. So if you have a question, put it into the chat and we're gonna be monitoring that. If you have a question that is not of interest to everybody, it's more specific, please wait to the end of the program. And of course, you could always email or call us separately as well.
And we have our information up on the screen. You can call us at 847-955-9000 or send Alan and I an email at Karen, it's Karen at shirelawgroup.com, and Alan is ALAN at shirelawgroup.com. You know, we're going to get to all your questions. Like Alan said, we'll stick around to make sure they're all answered. But sometimes as you think about some of this material, you have other questions that come up, and we're happy to answer any of those if you want to give us a call or send us an email.
And by the way, Shire Law Group, Karen and I are partners. We're an estate planning firm, and we're located right here in Lincolnshire, Illinois. So just wanted to let you guys know that as well. Are we ready to roll?
We are ready to go. So, you know, a little bit about us. We know that everyone joining us this evening, a lot of you have juniors and some of you have seniors. Some of your children have already turned 18 and many of them are going to turn 18. So once your child turns 18 on their 18th birthday, there's a lot of adventures that lie ahead for them. For those seniors, congratulations to those families. They're going to be graduating soon. Some of your children are going to be heading to college close to home or far away. Some are going to be traveling, maybe close to home or far away as well. Some of your children are going to be starting a new job. And some are going to be moving away from home, maybe for the first time, and moving into an apartment or into a dormitory. And most likely, it's a combination of a few of these things. But no matter what direction our children are headed in, there is one thing that we all share and we all have in common, and that is once our children turn 18, they are now considered legal adults. And with that designation comes some important changes for them, for you, and for your entire family. And we're going to talk about those this evening. The chart that we have up on the screen demonstrates some of those changes. Before your child turned 18, you could access your child's medical records. So if you had a question about vaccinations, making sure of dates and that everything was up to date, you could call your doctor's office, the pediatrician, child's doctor, ask the nurse or the doctor for information regarding their vaccination history. After 18, that right changes. Before 18, you could make decisions about the course of your child's medical treatment. So if your child was playing a sport and got injured or tripped and fell, you could go with your child to the doctor's office and you could, on your child's behalf, make some decisions about the course of the medical treatment that was going to ensue. And after 18, that right changes. Before 18, you could speak to your child's doctor. If your child wasn't feeling well, you could call up the doctor's office and you could go over the different ailments that your child was experiencing, and you could work with the nurse to decide on a course of treatment, whether it was going to be over the counter or prescription. After 18, that right changes. Before 18, you could help your child with their finances. So if your child had a bank account and they had received a statement that looked a little bit uncertain to them, and they had some questions and they were confused, they could ask you to call, and you could go ahead and do that on their behalf. And after 18, that right changes. Before 18, you could access your child's educational records. And in some cases, after 18, that right also changes. So, what is a parent to do? That's what we're here tonight to discuss with you. There are 3 essential documents to put in place. Those are known as healthcare and financial powers, and we're going to go over all 3 of those documents. We're also going to talk about FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And FERPA governs parents' access to their adult child's educational records. And we are also going to bring to you tonight some additional common concerns. So when we've done this presentation in the past, we've had people who've come up to us and they've asked us questions about some various things. And we wanted to bring those topics to you proactively this evening. So Alan's going to talk a little bit about wills and trusts and access to digital assets. And I'm going to have a bit of a discussion on dorm, apartment, and global insurance, as well as health and safety apps. But we're going to start with those 3 essential documents regarding healthcare and financial access. Those 3 documents are a healthcare power of attorney, a HIPAA authorization, and a power of attorney for property. And we're going to take each of these documents one at a time. A parent cannot make medical decisions on behalf of their adult child, even in an emergency, unless proper authorization has been put in place. And that proper authorization is known as a healthcare power of attorney. The healthcare power of attorney gives a parent or a designated individual the authority to make decisions on an adult child's behalf. And the one question that we always get from our adult children who come in to do these forms with us is, I don't want to sign anything that's going to take away any of my own rights. I want to be able to make my own decisions. And the good news is that none of these documents do that. So the healthcare power of attorney becomes important if your child is unable to make his or her own medical decisions. As long as they can make their own medical decisions, this document does not come into play. But if they can't, it's very important, because if this document was not in place, you may have to go to court to get a guardianship to have the ability to make medical decisions on your adult child's behalf. And in the middle of the crisis, that's the last thing that you want to be thinking about. So one of my friends had a daughter who was going to a large university, and it was her first time away from home. And my friend was a little nervous and wanted to make some suggestions to help her get acclimated to her new environment. So she proposed that her daughter think about joining in a mural team. And that way she could get to know some people. So she went ahead and she did that. She joined a soccer intramural team, and she was having a great time. And at the end of one of the practices, she collided with one of her teammates, and it was a bad collision. She was hurt very badly. She ends up at University Health Services. Remember, it's her first time away from home. She's in a new environment with new doctors she's never been with, doesn't understand what is being told of her, is in a lot of pain, doesn't feel like she can make her own medical decisions. Fortunately, my friend had a power of attorney for healthcare in place for her, and she was able to quickly get that to University Health Services so she could make some very quick decisions on behalf of her daughter. When we do these documents for our young adults, we always make sure that in addition to like an original and a copy of these documents, that they have an electronic copy of all these documents. And it's very important when you get these documents done for your young adults that you keep them someplace that you can easily access them, because when you need them, you're going to want to be able to get to them quickly so you can send them to wherever they need to go. The next document that we're going to talk about is the HIPAA authorization. HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And HIPAA allows healthcare providers to release and share medical information with designated people. So this is an information document, being able to have access to your young adults' information. It allows doctors to speak about a student or an adult child's medical condition with whomever your child designates on their HIPAA authorization. So this becomes extremely critical if your adult child is admitted to a medical facility and you need to get information about their condition, especially if they're not able to speak with you directly about their condition or cannot fully relay medical information to you. So you've all filled out HIPAA authorizations in the past, and your young adult is going to be filling those out as well. So you might be questioning, why would they need a general HIPAA authorization? Well, what happens if they end up in a hospital that they've never been in before? So there's no records in place for that hospital. And at the time they enter, they can't say, it's okay if my parents call, you can tell them what's going on. So it's very, very important that this general HIPAA authorization is in place. Again, at a time of crisis, your primary concern is going to be ensuring that your child's taken care of. You do not want the potential additional burden of a court proceeding or any kind of associated legal costs. When you need to get information, you want to be able to get it quickly. So throughout the course of this presentation, I will have real life examples of my children that I can share with you. Alan doesn't have any stories. They're all mine, but they are real, and I have had to use these documents before, so I can tell you how important they are. So hopefully you never need to use them, but if you do, you will be very happy that you have them in place. So my son, when he was in school, he was not feeling well, and this might happen with some of your children as well. You know, your kids get sick and you say, please go to University Health Services, get your name in there, go see somebody before things get worse. And I told my son that when he called me, and he had a million reasons why he could not go and get seen. He had a report due, he had someplace he needed to go, he had to meet with people, they didn't have good time slots, whatever it was. And by the end of that week, he had really progressed and he was very, very ill. And he called me late one night and said, I have to go to the emergency room. I'm going on my way. Don't worry, I'm with a friend. And even though I have my phone, I have one bar left, but my friend has his cell phone, and I gave him your information and he'll text you with an update. So I said, okay. And of course, I'm concerned and I am worried and I'm waiting to hear. I finally get a text from his friend who says, I'm so sorry. They won't give me any information. They won't tell me what is happening, what's going on. And I'm not authorized to get that information. So very quickly, I called up the hospital and I said, my son was admitted, and the nurse said, stop right there. I can't even tell you if he was admitted until I have the documents authorizing me to share this information with you in place. So I knew exactly where my electronic copies were. I sent it right to the hospital. I called back. The nurse said, thank you. Now that we have the proper authorization, I can tell you what's going on. And it ended up that my son was fine. But I can tell you from personal experience that when something like this occurs, you want to be able to have these documents in place, get them where they need to go so you can get the information that you need.
All right, so Karen went over with you the medical directives, the healthcare power of attorney, and the HIPAA authorization. What we're going to go through with you now is the power of attorney for property. So this is a financial power of attorney. So it is a form where you can appoint an agent to make financial decisions for you, primarily if you cannot make them yourself. So again, like Karen had mentioned earlier, this is a document that when the young adult signs it, they're not waiving any of their rights. So when young adults come into the office, we always explain to them, just because somebody has a power of attorney over you does not mean that they can override your own decision making. So that's a very critical point to make. This will allow, of course, if your young adult names you as their agents, it allows you as parents to manage their adult finances, their finances. It also becomes very critical if a young adult is injured or ill and is either temporarily or permanently unable to make their own financial decisions. The document becomes essential at that point, because if you don't have these documents in place, and you either need to make a financial decision or perhaps a medical decision for your young adult, your only recourse at that point would be to petition the court to become the adult child's legal guardian. And that's going to be time consuming and expensive. So to the extent that you could avoid that by having these simple forms in place, it's going to go a long way in making sure that you're prepared, God forbid, if anything were to happen. We always hope that no one will ever need to use the documents. That would be a perfect situation, but having the documents always gives peace of mind and allows you to ensure that you have the legal authority to do what you need to do. Now, we always get a question, I have a joint bank account with my adult child. Do I need a financial power of attorney to handle that account once they turn 18? And the answer is no. If you are a co-owner on the account, that is going to be good enough. The power of attorney is going to handle any assets that are in the adult child's name alone. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later when we tie in wills and trusts. A power of attorney for property, though, could handle a multitude of situations. Can handle, of course, bank accounts and investment accounts, handling titles for cars and any other assets that a young adult might have. And again, having it in place is going to avoid the necessity for going to court and being appointed a guardian in order to take care of these things. If a child is not readily able to access their bank account, again, because they're sick or incapacitated, or even if they're just not available, the power of attorney for property, that financial power of attorney, is going to make a big difference. The form can handle issues like dealing with a letter from the IRS or the Illinois Department of Revenue or some other taxing body. Of course, dealing with banking and financial accounts, and dealing with motor vehicles and other things. Another area that is very important is the area of digital assets. So we always tell our clients when they come in that you want to give your agent access to anything that you might have online, right? So if they need to get a password or they need to get access to something digital, you want them to have that authority spelled out in the power of attorney. Now, we always say, though, that should be plan B. As one recommendation, we always say for plan A, you may want to consider having a password management or emergency system within your family, right? So this way, if something were to happen, you'd have the capability to access an online account and be able to conduct business or transactions on behalf of your young adult. That's always going to be easier than trying to rely on the power of attorney, but having the power of attorney available is going to be a great backup plan, just in case you don't have that password management system or you don't have access to the digital asset online. We're also going to point out that the powers of attorney for healthcare that Karen reviewed with you and this power of attorney for property are statutory forms that are available from the state of Illinois. Now, when we do them for our adult children, we always add additional things like digital assets is not something that's part of the standard form, but you have the ability to add additional powers. And of course, we do that to enhance the usefulness of the form. But these forms are available online. Again, they're Illinois statutory short form powers of attorney for property and for healthcare. Just be careful if you're doing things on your own without the assistance of an attorney, that you follow the requirements as to how these documents need to be witnessed and notarized and all that kind of stuff. Because if that is done incorrectly, the form is not going to be valid. When we do these for our clients, of course, we take care of all of that for them. But that's something, if you're doing it yourself, then you want to be careful about that. By the way, the HIPAA form that we're providing is a generic HIPAA that is not tied to the state of Illinois, although we do reference the Illinois Medical Information Act in the form. But that's something that you would probably be able to get online as well, a sample of that form. We're going to talk a little bit later about what it might cost to get this done by a lawyer. So stay tuned for that in a little bit. We also get the question, well, this is great, but my child is going to wind up going to Penn State, or they're going to USC, or they're going to the University of Wisconsin, or somewhere out of the state of Illinois. Does it make sense for them to get these documents completed before they leave for these states? Are they going to be valid in these other states? And the answer is yes, as long as they're properly executed in the state where they are created and executed, then they're going to be fine in all 50 states. Now, another thing to point out is that you have to be 18 years old in order to do these forms, right? You have to be a legal adult. So if you're 17, you can't sign the form yet. We do get a lot of people in the office that tend to set up the signing on the adult child's 18th birthday. I can probably think of better ways to spend my birthday than in a lawyer's office, but we make it very enjoyable. We provide a little treat, and so it's very nice, but they cannot sign it until they're 18. So you want to keep that in mind as well. Now, we also get questions sometimes, well, are these good in foreign countries? Well, the answer to that question is we don't know, and it depends, because there's too many foreign countries to be able to tell you, who's going to honor these forms or not. But typically, if it's, a country that can, read the form, you're presenting to somebody who can translate it. If there's a foreign language involved, I mean, there's no reason that they shouldn't be accepted, but we just wouldn't be able to make that representation. I think that if your student is studying abroad or something, you may want to check with the program organizer about what they might recommend, and if there's any additional forms that they might need before they head off to their studies abroad.
So as you can see, this power of attorney for property, power of attorney for healthcare, HIPAA authorization, they all provide peace of mind because they allow you to make immediate decisions and give you access to critical information should some type of crisis occur. And that allows you just to focus on whatever decisions you need to make. The documents are easy to put in place. And when you're making your list, make sure that they're on the top of your list once your child turns 18. And if they're heading off, copies of the documents can be kept in a safe and easily accessible place. You do not need to send them with your child, but they should have electronic copies as well that they can access easily. And that can be sufficient because you can use electronic copies for all of these documents. You do not need to present an original or a copy of them. In addition to limitations on access to making medical decisions and helping out with financial affairs, when your child turns 18 and becomes a legal adult, there is also some limitations to accessing their educational records. And FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, is the act that governs that. So the next chart that we have here demonstrates some of those things. So you can see before 18 and after 18. So before 18, you can view your child's educational records. And after 18, that right is limited without the proper authorization in place. Before 18, you can request a correction to your child's educational records. And after 18, without the proper authorization in place, that right becomes limited. Before 18, you can decide who can see your child's educational records. And after 18, without the proper authorization in place, that is also limited. And before 18, you can get photocopies of your child's educational records. And after 18, without the proper authorization, that right is limited. So there's a common theme here, proper authorization. So what is the proper authorization? It is written consent. FERPA actually has a written consent form where your child will give access to you or to whomever they list on that FERPA form, the ability to have access to their educational records. There's a lot of misunderstanding around this. A lot of misunderstanding centers around the fact that the young adult might think that it's about giving access to their parents for their grades. It is far more important than that. So if your child is at school and they confide in an administrator that they are having a difficult time emotionally, mentally, and that administrator is concerned about what they are hearing, that administrator cannot reach out to a parent unless FERPA is in place, giving them the authorization to be able to do that. These FERPA forms are kept in the registrar's office. Sometimes the school that your child is attending might have their own FERPA authorization forms. It changes from year to year. So you want to make sure that you check and see if that school has its own FERPA form. We as a firm always do FERPA forms for all of our young adult clients. They're backups if a school has them in place, but we always do them because it is so important, just in case an administrator would feel like they had to reach out to you for some reason that they feel is critical and essential. They need that FERPA form in order to be able to do that. So we also want to bring you some common concerns that have been raised during the course of this presentation when we've done it. And those are wills and trusts and access to digital assets, which Alan is going to touch on next. And then I'm going to follow up and talk a bit about dorm apartment and global insurance and health and safety apps.
Thanks, Karen. So we've talked about powers of attorney and healthcare directives. We always get the question, does my adult child also need to have a will or a trust? So let's take a look at what those are, and let's try to answer that question for you. So first, let's start off with just a brief description of what a will is. Many of you may be familiar with the term a will. It's a document that somebody might create in order to state where they want their assets to be distributed when they pass away and to whom, and maybe even how. That is a will. A will is only effective at death. So that's an important concept, because the powers of attorney in healthcare directives are only going to be effective during lifetime. So together, they kind of cover both time periods, right? Powers of attorney effective during life. A will is effective during death or after death. So a typical will, let's say for a married person, might be if I pass away, I'm leaving everything to my spouse, otherwise in equal shares to my kids, right? And my spouse might have a reciprocal will that says, my spouse is leaving everything to me, and if I'm not around, then in equal shares to our children. So that would be what a typical will might look like. Of course, there'd be a little bit more involved in that, but just kind of giving you the short version there. Now let's contrast that to a trust. So we mentioned a will is only effective at death. A trust is actually effective upon signing. So it is, and it's also effective after death. So it's kind of like a super document that can be used to plan for potential incapacity or disability, because it's effective immediately upon signing. And then it could also be effective after death as well, to talk about the distribution and the of assets and where assets should go. So that gives you a little bit of background regarding those documents. So now the big question, right? Does my adult child need either one of these? Well, of course, the answer is going to be, it depends, right? So some of the questions you may want to ask is, does your adult child have their own significant amount of assets or their own wealth? If they do, then they may want to consider creating a will or a trust. Now, there are also some substitutes that are out there that would prevent the need of a will or a trust for certain assets. And for younger people, this may be good enough for the time being, right? So an account can be payable on death. So your young adult could have an account, and they could list you or your spouse or both of you as payable on death. So if your young adult passed away, those assets would then automatically be paid to you. That's one way to use a substitute setup. Another way would be if the assets are joint, right? So if you have a joint bank account with your young adult, not only do you have the power to do things with the account because you're a co-owner, but if your young adult were to pass away, you would become the sole owner of that account. And of course, the opposite is true. If you were to pass away and you have a joint account with your young adult, then they would become the sole owner of that account automatically. So these items that are listed here do not require a will or a trust. In fact, these would take precedence over or priority over any will or trust. The same thing with a beneficiary designation. So if your young adult is working and they have a 401k, and they've named you or a sibling or something like that as a beneficiary, that does not get distributed through a will or a trust. If they were to pass away, then the custodian of that account is going to honor the beneficiary designation and pay the money out to the named beneficiaries. The same would be true for like a life insurance policy or anything else that might have a beneficiary designation. So this may negate the need at this point in time for your young adult to have a will or a trust. We say typically a good time to address this, if it hasn't been addressed earlier, would be when they have major life changes, like they get married, certainly when they have kids, because another important thing that a will does is allow you to designate a guardian to take care of your child if you were to pass away. And that, of course, is extremely important, more important than money, of course. So those are great times to make sure that the young adults are addressing either doing a will or a trust or even both. The other thing we wanted to mention again is that concept of digital assets. So when you're creating these documents, you want to make sure that because the power of attorney is only effective during lifetime, if somebody were to pass away, you want to make sure that the executor under the will, the person who's in charge of carrying out the instructions under the will, is actually going to have the authority to go into accounts and do things, to access things online and to be able to get that information. Again, a good plan B, right? So plan A would be to have that password emergency system that's highly recommended. Typically, it's going to make it easier for everybody. Karen, there is a question from one of our participants that I'll direct to you. How does the HIPAA work for children getting access to the parent information?
Right. So good question. So on your HIPAA authorization, you would have to authorize your child to get that information. So it would have to be something that you do on your own HIPAA authorization, so that they call them covered entities could release the information to anybody that you authorize. So in paragraph 1 of your HIPAA authorization, you can write all the people that you authorize to get your information and who can release that information. Any physician that you'd be working with or any entity like a hospital. So if you were in the hospital, your child could then receive information because you've listed them in that first paragraph as authorized. So I now have my second real life scenario for you that I experienced with my other child regarding insurance. So things happen. And one of the things you want to put on your list to look at is insuring yourself with dorm, apartment and rental, and global insurance. So if your child's going to be traveling, you're going to look at global insurance. They're going to be going off to school. Check out dorm, apartment, and rental insurance. So standalone policies are sometimes surprisingly inexpensive. We don't endorse one policy over another policy, but we do encourage you to look into it. Your homeowner's policy might also cover some of these things, but you'd have to look at the deductible and see if it makes sense to utilize your home or your standalone policy that you might find, but definitely something to put on your list. So my daughter went to school in the middle of Pennsylvania. Gets very cold there during the winter. And we had told both of my children before they went to school, hold on to your computer, because their whole world is in their computer, their assignments, everything's in there. And we said, never leave your computer unattended, make sure you take it with them. And we went over that with both of them. So they knew that even though you don't want to think that somebody might take your computer or you might leave it behind, it's just something that we wanted them to be thoughtful about. And in the middle of a cold winter day, my daughter went to her favorite spot in the library where she would always study. And she got her coat on and backpack, put her computer in there, and went to study. I don't know about all of you, but when I went to college, they did not have Grubhub where you could order things up directly to wherever you were. But fortunately, they do now. And she was hungry and she ordered something. And she had to go downstairs in order to pick up her lunch. She heeded the advice and she picked up her computer and took it with her, got her food, came back up and found that her winter coat had been stolen. And besides being so upset that somebody would actually take her coat, it was the middle of winter. She was freezing cold. She didn't know what was going to happen next. So fortunately, we had purchased dorm and apartment rental insurance, and that insurance covered theft. And all she had to do was file a police report, and within 1 week, she had a replacement of her same exact coat, and the insurance had paid for itself with that one instance. So it's something to look into, see if it makes sense for your family. different policies cover different things from theft to damage. So just something to put on your list and check out and see if it makes sense for your family. And Alan's laughing because he has no examples to share with you. I do.
Yes, my kids are all both saints, and we don't have any examples about them, so they're all Karen's kids. So
It's true.
just
This is something that we wanted to bring to your attention. This is not just for your young adults, it's for everybody in your family. So if you have an iPhone, you will see on your home screen this symbol, this white square with a red heart in it. If you have a different smartphone, you can download a similar app. This is the Medical ID app. And you can put in information that would be very important for a first responder if they came upon a scene. It could have information in there, whatever you put in there, important if your child has an allergy to a medicine or to a food or a condition that they would need to know about. It is protected, but the first responders are trained to be able to enter any kind of lock screen. So whether it's facial recognition or numerical code, they know how to get by that and access the information that you put in there. So again, we don't endorse using this or how much you put in this in the Medical ID app, but we do want to bring it to your attention because it's a very valuable tool, especially if there was some kind of condition or something that would need to be known. Just something to think about, not only again for your young adult, but anybody in your family that it would make sense to utilize. And then wanted to talk a little bit about safety apps. We get this question all the time. There are dozens of safety apps. If you get online and you Google, you're going to find a lot of them. And the one thing that we will say is before you download them, make sure you vet them carefully. So you might want to ask a trusted friend, or if your child, has somebody that they trust, what they're using. I can share with you that when my daughter went to school, we would do Find My Friends. And you could do an Uber that you can trace the Uber ride, Life 360. There's some really good apps out there that you can utilize. Look into it, see what makes sense for your family. Make sure you vet them before you download them. There's just some really good ones that can also make your child a little bit more comfortable as they're going off, as well as you.
And then one way to help if your kids aren't contacting you enough when they're away at school, you could always change the Netflix password. That will cause them to contact you ASAP. So just a little tip there. We also want to talk about planning remotely. So we talked a little bit earlier about, you have to be 18 to get this done. So that's very important. But we can get started on putting everything together and getting the process completed beforehand. So you have to be 18. We can also do this planning remotely. An executive order was entered during COVID that allows documents to be executed remotely. There's a lot of requirements that go along with that, but we're very well versed in that. So if that's a situation where somebody couldn't come to our office, we could certainly do that. They do need to be in the state of Illinois, though. So if your adult child is going away to school, they would have to, they should come to us before they leave or when they come back from break, in order to get those documents done. So the most important thing is you want to make sure that this planning gets done while your adult child is able to do it, right? You can't do it after the fact, right? So if somebody is incapacitated because of an accident or some other problem, they may not be able to sign legal documents. And then at that point, the only thing that you're going to be able to do is to petition the court to become, again, their legal guardian. So in order to avoid that, you should really consider having these documents put in place. Like we said earlier, you could find these forms online. We do recommend using an attorney, of course, because we are attorneys, but we have a very special and inexpensive program We charge $300 and we have an online portal that the young adult will enter the information. We create the documents, have the young adult come into our office, or we do it online via Zoom, and we explain everything to them so they feel comfortable. And then we have them sign the documents, and then we notarize and witness everything. And we take care of all of that. We turn them into digital documents and all that good stuff. So for $300, it's a pretty good deal. But you do have the capability to do it yourself as well, if you are so inclined to do that.
So, as we've been talking about this evening, some of the most important gifts that you can give to your child when they become an adult at the age of 18 is to protect them with that power of attorney for healthcare. So if they can't make their own medical decisions, they're naming who can step in and make those for them. HIPAA authorization, all the people that are authorized to be able to get information. For example, if they were in a hospital, who could call up to get information about what was happening. Power of attorney for property, assistance with financial affairs, that FERPA authorization, consent form to access educational records, will or trust if that's advisable, like Alan discussed this evening. Check out insurance, see if it works for your family, just something to put on the list. And those medical ID apps and those safety apps, just something to look into and see what might be best for your family. Can both people be authorized? So are you referring, I'm assuming that you're referring to a power of attorney. So for HIPAA authorization,